Hey folks, my name's Chris Dean, as I've said before, and I want to welcome you today to a little presentation I'm going to do on typography, particularly as it relates to images. And the key point here is to help you with your expertise speech and also to sort of further some notions of digital rhetoric. So without further ado, let's take a look at what we're going to do next. So in terms of what we'll be covering, talk about the relationship between text and image, which a lot of theorists said is one of the sort of key components of digital rhetoric, particularly in the 21st century. We're also going to take a little quiz where I'm going to ask you, and this may seem strange until you do it, what shoes go with what font. We'll also talk a little bit about Lupton and how that might actually connect to what you're going to do. And then finally, just a little bit of advice about how you can play with fonts and images in your own work, particularly the expertise speech. So, as I said, first of all, we have a little quiz for you. And I want you to know, I want you to understand which of these shoes go with which font. In other words, I want you to look at the shoes. So, for instance, this boot here, and ask yourself, does it make more sense to pair it with Mesquite, Californian, or Bauhaus? Each of these is a font out of a particular font family. And the funny thing I think you're going to find out is this is going to be pretty easy to do, and you're going to find out that your ideas about what font goes with what image are not too different from mine. So I'll let you take that quiz right now. So you want to find out how you did? These are my answers. Mesquite goes with the boot. Californian goes with the flip-flops. Bauhaus goes with the nice two-tone shoes here. Mesquite, as you can see, sort of has a Western feel, thus the Western boot. It makes perfect sense. Californian, which kind of reminds us of our lovely home state, actually goes with the flip-flops that everybody wears, even to class. Finally, Bauhaus, more formal, more sort of exact in its presentation, tends to go with this. These are just sort of immediate reactions that we have to fonts, and we all, in fact, have them. Now, that's not to say that there is a right and a wrong answer here, because there's not. Let me explain. So, what I'm trying to point out with the font image sort of test that we just did, which is actually from Spikerman and Ginger. You're not going to read them, but there are folks who've thought very, very long and hard about the nature of fonts, is that you have an aesthetic. And that aesthetic has been established by the consumption of images and fonts probably since you first became aware of images and then when you became aware of written language. Now, I want to point out that you don't have to sort of do directly a sort of matchy-matchy thing like we just did. But think about what Alan Lupton said, which is, you can see here in the quote, is that image and text eat away at the vessels that would seal them shut. In other words, there's much more play and much more fluidity now in terms of how you use font. It's just not the sort of thing that appears in text in a book. Finally, I want to say this. As you move towards your own uses of font and arrangement and thinking visually, and I think that's the key thing here, to think visually about font and image, you're going to want to play, experiment, and as Robin Williams, not the late great comic, but a wonderfully alive writer about design said, you need to be bold. So be bold, have some fun, and start thinking about how you're going to arrange your expertise speech.